It's day 112 of 118 days with the Tudors. Today we're thinking about 1596, and this is the year that we see Robert Devereux, the Queen's youngest favourite, rise to his full height of power. Before we get into that though, I've had a little realisation. While I've always called this 118 days with the Tudors because the Tudor era was 118 years long, I didn't really account for the fact that I'll be making a video for 1485 and 1603, which actually in total gives you 119 days, plus the fact I did 2 videos on 1536. So all in total there will actually be 120 videos. So just ignore the days part for now. We've still got a week left, so the last video will still be on the 29th of March, Saturday the 29th of March, as was always planned. I just I didn't account for the fact that that would make 119 videos instead of 118, and this is why my PhD is in history and not mathematics. Anyway, 1596, Robert Devereux. Robert Devereux was the son of Lettice Knowles and Walter Devereux, and then also the stepson of Robert Dudley. So Robert Dudley was Elizabeth's real favourite, and then Robert Devereux was his stepson, and he was really sort of in his final years training him up to get on Elizabeth's good side. So let's do a little bit of backstory on Robert Devereux and get him up to 1596. In 1586, he returned to England. He returned to court as a war hero, and he was young and intelligent, and he really caught the Queen's eye, and he was a really nice distraction from the whole Mary Queen of Scots business. Now, he was obviously backed, as I said, by Dudley, and between the two of them, they hoped to kind of knock their rival, Walter Raleigh, out of the way. But if you remember, Walter Raleigh kind of does that to himself in the end. And by May 1587, he's established himself as a constant companion to Elizabeth. He was created Master of the Horse, so that was Robert Dudley's old position. And when he visited her at Tilbury, so if you remember her speech at Tilbury during the Spanish Armada, he brought with him a huge, lavishly equipped army and really kind of took care of her and waited on her. And if you remember, in the September of that year, Dudley actually passes away. So before that, when he's recovering while he's trying to get better, in the August of that year, she asked the young Devereux to move into Dudley's quarters at court. Now, Dudley's death, his stepfather's death, was a real blow for Devereux because he was left, he'd been put quite quickly into these prestigious positions that Dudley was kind of preparing him for and sort of training him for, and now he's been left without the person who was helping him, and he just didn't feel ready to take on these roles that he had, or to sort of navigate the position he'd been put in as Elizabeth's favourite. And this also led to like a fresh rivalry with Walter Raleigh. He really didn't like the sort of social politics of court, the, having to stay on the Queen's best side and kind of, navigate this social situation. He much preferred military work. He preferred to be out there fighting or, organising military situations. He didn't love being in court, and he was constantly going off on war missions, even though Elizabeth had told him not to. And I know I joke about Elizabeth being like a mother to a lot of these people, but you really see this with Robert Devereux. She really wants to keep him close and keep him at court and doesn't like him going off to fight at all. So, for example, in 1589, he goes off and joins Drake's counter armada to attack Spain and Portugal, even though she's told him not to. But then he comes back and quickly regains her favour, as these men seem to do. He becomes so sure of his position at court that he even goes off and has himself a secret marriage, and we know how Elizabeth feels about that. He marries someone called Lady Sydney, who is actually Francis Walsingham's daughter. Keeps it secret, but it's made public in 1590 when she is very clearly pregnant at court. Now Elizabeth's obviously furious, but inevitably forgives him, as she often does. His wife doesn't like court either, so she doesn't really come to court now that they're married, but that leads to him having lots of mistresses at court. But his wife doesn't seem to mind too much. She seems very devoted to him. In 1591, he was made lieutenant of the Queen's army in Normandy, but the Queen again really resents him being away from court and just sends him all these scathing letters complaining about how long everything's taking, which really winds him up. But it does seem to be at this point that Elizabeth starts to realise she is treating him a bit like a child, and it's not entirely clear whether she views him in a very maternal way, or, you know, like a son, or whether it is more of like a romantic kind of interest. However, it's at this point that he really just doesn't want to be her favourite anymore. He wants to be an actual part of the Privy Council, and he really pushes for this. But ultimately, it's William Cecil who is blocking him. But in 1593, he is sworn in and he's made a member of the Privy Council, and he really throws himself into work. He throws himself into the meetings. But he and William Cecil don't really see eye to eye. And this changes a little bit in 1594. In 1594, he accuses a court physician, Rodrigo Lopez, of planning to murder the Queen. And this is kind of laughed out. You know, Cecil says this is ridiculous, there's no evidence for it. So he spends 2 days in his room being embarrassed, really, and feeling a bit sorry for himself. But then he goes on to find more evidence, enough evidence that leads to this physician actually being found guilty and executed. And then Cecil has to kind of pull himself back a little bit here. So this is a real win for Robert Devereux. He's proven himself right. So at this point, Cecil and Robert Devereux have to live quite peacefully together, and William Cecil have to live peacefully together. Now, William Cecil has a son, Robert Cecil, and he has to kind of act as a bit of a bridge builder between the two. Robert Devereux really pulls himself up now, and he becomes a statesman of real international position. He has agents all around Europe sending him reports of this, that and the other, and people in Europe support him as being the next William Cecil. William Cecil isn't going to live forever. That's very clear. And there's a wondering who's going to step into his shoes as the Queen's kind of chief secretary, key advisor. William Cecil would like it to be his son, Robert Cecil, who is very capable. But there is support for Robert Devereux as well. And you've got two clear camps there. He also has the support of James VI, who has been, earmarked for a potential heir for Elizabeth. And he's also known for his toleration of Catholicism, which gains him some support in Europe. Now, his real key moment in war comes when, in 1596, he sets out with a big fleet to attack a Spanish city. Now, they're not met with much resistance, but the Spanish actually set fire to their own ship that's containing all of the treasure they were hoping to take. So they don't end up taking with any sort of treasure or any money or any gold or anything like that to take home. So instead what they do is they round up people who are politically significant and take them as hostages back to England in the hope that it will gain a ransom. This was actually a really big loss for Spain. It had quite devastating economic repercussions for them, and it led to their bankruptcy the following year. So he's considered to have done a really good job there. So that's where we're going to leave Robert Devereux. He's at the height of his career as like a war patron, as somebody who's really involved in the military. He's got loads of support in Europe. He's got potentially the ear of James VI, and even Cecil has had to give him a little bit of respect. And this is quite interesting because I think when we see him in films, and granted, I don't watch much TV, but from what I've seen, he's always just portrayed as this kind of silly, immature young guy who just runs around the court, doing what he wants because, he's oh so beautiful and Elizabeth loves him. But actually, he does seem to have had some real credentials behind him. He seems to have been very good at what he did and to have gained a lot of respect and a lot of support, although he does seem to have been a bit of a romantic rogue. So I'll see you tomorrow for 1597, and we're going to be having a look at what life was like living on London Bridge. See you then.